They're making our food out of people. Next thing, they'll be breeding us like cattle for food. You gotta tell them. You gotta tell them.
Promise, Tiger, I promise. I'll tell the exchange.
You tell everybody. Listen to me, Hatcher. You gotta tell them. Silent breed is people! We gotta stop them somehow!
Ah, yes, the dramatic final moments of the classic post-apocalyptic science fiction thriller Soylent Green, released in 1973 and starring Charlton Heston. Recent news from the pet food industry has me thinking a lot about that movie. Hi, this is Mike Fry from No Kill Learning, and today I've got a story to tell you that you're going to wish was fiction, like Soylent Green. But sadly, it's not. The story I'm going to tell has not been widely covered, which is unfortunate because people who live with pets should know about it in order to keep their animals healthy and safe. It's very disturbing news, so brace yourself.
Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.
Most people who've thought much at all about pet food, or who've paid any attention at all to the constant stream of pet food recalls in the news, would not be surprised to hear me say that most pet foods are made with poor quality ingredients that are not fit for human consumption. Similarly, they wouldn't be surprised if I told them that the cheap ingredients in pet food are then doused with large amounts of toxic preservatives like BHA, which is why they can sit on shelves for months and months without going bad. They also wouldn't be horribly surprised to find that all kinds of other toxic stuff is getting into our pet foods, or that cancer rates in dogs and cats are climbing so fast that currently half of pets over the age of 10 are developing cancer. This is only a partial list of the pet food recalls since 2009. But there's one specific type of pet food recall that I would like to focus on, because those recalls clearly show how deep and dark the pit that is the pet food industry can be. This is sodium pentobarbital, aka Euthanasia solution. It's marketed and sold under a variety of brand names like Euthisol, Nebutol, and Pentasol, and even under stranger, darker names like Fatal Plus and Succumb, and I swear I'm not making those last two up. Since about the mid-1990s, it's been known that sodium pentobarbital has been showing up in pet foods, sometimes with fatal results.
Nobody should have to go through what we went through. Nobody. It's not fair. I mean, I would give anything to see Tallulah again.
Begin with this tonight is the drug that is used to kill dogs and cats in your dog's food.
There are several brands of dog food that could be contaminated with a euthanasia drug.
As having the euthanasia drug pentobarbital in its food.
Dog food recall after a drug used to euthanize animals is found in some canned foods.
New at 10, potentially deadly dog food. A major recall tonight after chemicals used to put animals down is found in a popular brand of pet food.
Our initial investigation prompted a recall of 107 million cans of pet food for containing the euthanasia drug pentobarbital.
And those were just a few of the clips related to one recall from earlier this year. More often than not, the drug is in the food, it goes unreported, and it's not recalled. No one says a word about it. To better understand that, we need to go back in time to the late 1990s. (1998) was the year the Food and Drug Administration's Center for Veterinary Medicine decided to purchase a number of commercial dog foods to test them for sodium pentobarbital. What would cause the Center for Veterinary Medicine to want to test dog foods for euthanasia solution, one might want to ask? Well, the answer to that is pretty creepy. It turns out that large numbers of veterinarians were reporting that it was taking more and more pentobarbital in order to successfully euthanize pets. It was as if dogs and cats were developing a tolerance for the drug, as if dogs and cats were getting regular exposure to euthanasia solution. If pets were getting regular doses of euthanasia solution, the most likely source of the drug was their pet foods. The thinking was fairly simple. Animal shelters and veterinarians euthanize pets using sodium pentobarbital. They then usually send the animal carcasses off to rendering plants where they're made into everything from fertilizers to cosmetics and pet foods. Pet food companies are, in fact, one of the top purchasers of animal products from rendering plants. So the FDA's Center for Veterinary Medicine decided to purchase a bunch of pet foods and then began testing. And the results were shocking. Nearly half of the samples tested positive for pentobarbital. I'm serious, almost half. And in spite of that, no recalls were issued, and important details about the study were sealed, including the brand names of the products that tested positive. Hardly anyone knew anything about it. It wasn't until 2002 that they were required to disclose the details of the study, but then they did it quietly, and still no recalls were done. Instead, the FDA decided to conclude that pentobarbital in low doses had no effect on pets, completely ignoring the fact that the study had been done because veterinarians were reporting an actual observable effect on pets. Even more troubling, knowing full well that DNA deteriorates at temperatures above 370 degrees Fahrenheit, and knowing that rendering occurs at temperatures far above that, where dog and cat carcasses are mixed in with cows and sheep and other animals, and those rendering products are then cooked again at high temperatures, being made into pet foods, and then extruded under high pressure and more heat. Anyway, in spite of knowing all that, they decided to test pet foods for dog and cat DNA, and when they didn't find any, they said they couldn't know if dogs and cats were being made into pet food. No real meaningful action was taken since then, and the ridiculous DNA study done by the FDA has then been used by many people to discredit any notion that dogs and cats killed in animal shelters are being used to make pet food. Snopes, the famous fact-checking website, cited the debunked DNA study by the FDA in order to categorize the claim as unproven. They say that while it's true that animal shelters send dogs and cats to rendering, animal shelters also take in all kinds of other animals too. Their theory being that maybe all those other animals are being disposed of differently than the dogs and cats. Some people simply don't want to believe that dogs and cats euthanized at animal shelters and veterinary clinics are being ground up into pet food. But they are. The undercover video I'm playing over here is of dog and cat carcasses being collected at California veterinary clinics and animal shelters, and then being dumped into a pit that funnels them into a giant grinder to be made into pet food. I've blurred the video because it's too graphic to show you. If anyone needs proof that it's real, contact me and I'll point you to the full unaltered version of the video. And if that still doesn't convince you, here's a picture of how dead animals are collected and stored at animal shelters while they await pickup from the rendering plants. Again, I've blurred out the most graphic parts of the image. Typically, they're all just dumped into these big 50-gallon drums until they get picked up. When the rendering truck arrives, these 50-gallon drums are simply hoisted up into the air and dumped en masse into this giant truck, mixed in with roadkill and carcasses of zoo animals and the bodies of horses and diseased or downed livestock that couldn't be sold into the human food supply. I'm sorry, but no one can possibly believe that people at rendering plants are sorting through these gruesome loads in order to remove the dogs and cats, particularly when there's no requirement for them to do so. If you still don't believe that dogs and cats are being ground up and made into pet food, maybe you'll believe this guy. This is Hirsch Pendel, the former president of the Association of American Feed Control Officers. You know, the folks who oversee pet food inspections and labeling. Back in the 1990s, he was interviewed by Seattle King TV News. Here's what he had to say on the topic back then.
These are Holsteins here. Hirsch Pendel is the current president of the Association of Feed Control Officials, a group made up of North American agriculture and animal feed specialists. AFCO writes ingredient definitions and suggests nutritional guidelines for pet food makers.
Pet food industry.
Pendel says he's not aware of any written law or regulation at any level, specifically prohibiting the use of rendered products which contain dead cats and dogs.
Aesthetically, it may not be acceptable, but nutritionally, it's still protein.
Can we tell what's in pet food just by looking at the label?
There's no way to really tell that, because if the ingredient says meat and bone meal, you don't know if that's cattle or sheep or horse or fluffy.
Between then and now, not much has really changed, which is why pets are still being poisoned by sodium pentobarbital in commercial pet foods. This is Dr. Steve Solomon, the current head of the FDA's Center for Veterinary Medicine. On September 18th of this year, 2018, Dr. Solomon spoke at a joint pet food conference held in St. Louis, Missouri. During his presentation, Dr. Solomon told the audience that, and I quote, "New evidence is showing that sodium pentobarbital contamination of pet foods, may be a much more pervasive problem in the animal food supply than originally thought," end quote. Wait, what? Does he mean more pervasive than the average consumer thought, or more pervasive than his own agency thought when it found pentobarbital in nearly half the pet food samples it tested? Also, what's this new evidence he was speaking of, and why don't pet owners know about it? Solomon went on to explain that these rendered products, as he called them, are valuable to the pet food industry and reduce strains on the environment. What he's talking about there is the fact that one of the alternatives to rendering is sending animal carcasses to landfills, which is also problematic because wildlife can end up eating the euthanized animals, or the toxins can wind up leaching into our groundwater. And given that animal shelters alone dispose of about 125 million pounds of dogs and cat carcasses every year, that's a lot of toxic waste to be dealing with. Honestly, can anybody possibly believe that the solution to that is feeding the toxic waste to our pets? It seems the entities that we count on to protect us and our pets have utterly failed us on this topic. Animal shelters that we look to as leaders in the field of animal sheltering and care continue needlessly turning healthy and treatable pets into toxic waste and then shipping them off to rendering plants without warning pet owners of the dangers. And veterinarians also supply the rendering plants too, while looking the other way and pretending there's nothing to worry about. Hey, I warned you up front this was a dark and disturbing topic. But I'm going to switch gears to share with you the good news, and there is good news in this story. But before I do, I want to recommend 2 books to anybody who wants to know more information about the pet food industry. The first is The Food Pets Die For by Ann Martin. It's available from Amazon in paperback and Kindle formats. I also recommend Not Fit for a Dog by Drs. Michael Fox, Elizabeth Hodgkins, and Marion Smart. It's an insider's look at the pet food industry, and I should note that Dr. Hodgkins was a senior nutritionist for Hill's Pet Foods, makers of Science Diet. I'm pretty sure her former employer's not real happy with the book either. Okay, now for the good news. Protecting yourself and your pets is easier than you think. Simply ditch commercial pet foods by making your own pet food at home. We've been doing it at our house for more than 30 years, using foods we buy at the grocery store. Mostly raw meat that is fit for human consumption. There are recipes and suggestions and tips all over the internet to help you get started. At our house, we keep a stash of pet food ingredients in a special area of the refrigerator. We easily mix up raw meat, a little bit of grain, and vegetables for each serving. It takes about the same amount of time as opening a can or scooping kibble out of a bag, and the difference it's made for our pets is remarkable. They're happier, healthier, have more energy, and we've saved tons of money on vet bills. We have no real way to quantify how much money we've saved, but it's a lot. Take our dog Bella as just one example. When we adopted Bella many years ago, we didn't think she was going to live very long. She was severely diabetic, and traditional veterinarians were having an impossible time trying to regulate her insulin. Her diabetes was so bad and her pancreas so damaged that it wasn't even able to produce digestive enzymes anymore, making it impossible for her to absorb her food. No matter how much she ate, she was losing weight because the food would just pass right through. In spite of that, her blood sugars were still spiking off the charts, often exceeding 750, the highest reading possible on her glucometer. Veterinarians had prescribed an expensive prescription diet often given to diabetic dogs. It was Science Diet WD formula, and when I read the ingredients on the food, I was shocked to see that it was loaded with corn, more corn, other starches, and even sugars. So let that sink in. The pet food industry, the veterinary industry, was feeding a diabetic carnivore an expensive food that was made up mostly of starches, sugars, and other junk, and almost no meat at all. Needless to say, we tossed the Science Diet prescription food in the garbage where we believe it belonged, and began giving her healthful food based primarily on raw meat. We added organ meat, particularly pancreas, so that her food would be able to be digested. Her blood sugar dropped from 700 or higher to normal range. It has remained stable and under 200 ever since. She also began gaining needed weight, and we were also able to cut her insulin dose in half. Feeding Bella homemade food likely saved her life and saved us a ton of money. In my years in animal rescue, I've had the opportunity to convert many pets to homemade food and have seen all kinds of medical and behavior problems disappear, ranging from idiopathic aggression to epilepsy and dermatitis. Bella's now a senior dog, but you'd never know it by watching her run and play with our other pets. She has more energy and vitality than most pets half her age. If for some reason you will not make your pet's food yourself, you can at least learn to read pet food labels and read them diligently. Reading pet food labels can be shocking in and of itself. Avoiding rendered products is easy. Don't buy any foods that have unidentified animal products in them, like animal fat, or animal tallow, or meat and bone meal, or animal byproduct meal. That will eliminate most pet foods from your list. When you learn to look at other problem ingredients and avoid foods containing those things too, you'll have very few commercial pet food options left. And if you still refuse to cut the cord that ties you to the commercial pet food industry, one simple thing you can do is to buy only foods that are certified organic. On behalf of your companion animals, I strongly encourage you to join the millions of Americans saying goodbye to commercial pet foods in favor of making whole, healthful nutrition made for their pets in their own kitchens. If you do that, the next time you hear about a recall, you can rest easy knowing that your pets are safe. If you're an animal shelter, rescue organization, or are related to animals in some other way and would like to build a truly healthful pet food program for your pets, I'm here to help. My contact information is at the link, and thanks for watching.